I'm not family.
No. You're cargo.
So that was a fucking lie.
It's only March, and we've already gotten what is, right now, one of the best TV shows of the year. I am, of course, talking about The Last of Us, the HBO series based off of the 2013 acclaimed video game of the same name. 20 years after a deadly fungal infection ravages most of Earth, the surviving populations in America live in restricted quarantine zones run by the Federal Disaster Response Agency, or FEDRA, an oppressive authoritarian branch of the military that has essentially replaced the government. When our story starts, two survivors, Joel and Tess, are in search of a car battery so they can escape the quarantine zone and travel to Wyoming to find Joel's brother, Tommy, with whom they have recently lost contact. In return for a working vehicle, the two are given the task of transporting 14-year-old Ellie out of the quarantine zone and to a base held by the Fireflies, a rebel group resisting FEDRA. However, the pair realize very quickly that Ellie is not just some random girl, but is actually immune to the fungal infection, and thus might be the key to creating a cure. I first found out about this adaptation sometime in 2022, and I was beyond excited. It quickly became my most anticipated series of 2023. You might be wondering, why were you so excited? Is it because you played the game, so you were already a fan? No. I am not a gamer at all. I don't own any sort of gaming console. Well, is it because you watched a playthrough of it on YouTube? No. I didn't even know that playthroughs of games existed until a couple months ago. That's how much I'm not a gamer. It was a completely unknown concept to me. So then, why the hell were you excited about this show? Let me tell you. In the year of our Lord 2020, I came across a video on YouTube titled, "Let's Get Sad, a Last of Us video essay." I vaguely knew about the game at that point. A lot of people were talking about it more since 2020 was the year The Last of Us Part 2 came out, so stuff about this game was floating around. I had heard nothing but good things about at least Part 1, Part 2 is a different story, so I was kind of intrigued. I'm always looking for new stories to consume, and again, I knew I was never going to play this game, so I thought I may as well watch the video essay. So I clicked on the video, and over the next hour and a half, I experienced the most beautiful, tragic, brutal, heart-wrenching story, and I came out the other side a shell of myself. This was the video essay. Lady Knight the Brave, I offer you the sincerest thank you for bringing this story into my life. From that point on, The Last of Us lived in the back of my head. It was a very well-made story that I knew I enjoyed immensely, so when I found out that HBO was adapting it, I was so freaking ready. Here's the thing, though. I watched that video essay almost 3 years ago, and in those years, I applied to universities, I graduated high school, I started university, my mental health went downhill, I got COVID, I got my driver's license, I reached the legal age of everything in Canada, so bottoms up, I lived through 3 more freezing winters and 2 more sweaty summers, and I watched over 300 more movies and 50 more shows. Basically, a lot of stuff went down, which means that the part of my brain that remembered The Last of Us was starting to fade. So by the time the show came out, I didn't remember anything that happened in the story. Well, okay, that's not entirely true. I remembered some things, and specifically one very big thing from The Last of Us Part 2, if you know, you know, but the vast majority of the story was gone from my brain. But you know what wasn't gone? The feeling that The Last of Us gave me. Though I couldn't remember much of the specifics of the story, I still very clearly remembered the way that I felt when I consumed it. And it's through this that I think that I was in a very unique position when it came to watching this show. You see, I assume most people that were going to watch this show fell into 2 camps. Those who had played the game, knew the story, and were already fans, and those who had never played the game and didn't know anything about it and were just going to watch the show. Both camps would have their justified reservations going into the adaptation. Game fans would of course worry that the adaptation would take something they loved and crap all over it, while newbies would have the regular reservations one would expect when going into a completely new show and not knowing what they're getting themselves into. I didn't fall into either of these camps. The Last of Us was not something I was overly familiar with, nor was it something I was completely new to. I didn't know the story beat by beat, but I also wasn't going in blind. Which means, for me, I had no specific reservations when it came to this show. I was just purely excited, and the second I learned in 2022 that this adaptation was happening, I had this strong gut feeling that it was going to be great. No hang-ups, no ifs, ands, or buts. Well, the show started airing in January, and from what I was hearing about it, I was very quickly proven right. People had mostly good things to say about it. Most reservations the game fans and newbies alike had dissipated. And when I finally started watching it for myself a few weeks after it started airing, I was able to confirm my prediction watching for myself. The Last of Us is incredible. You know how people wish they could experience a particularly good story again for the first time? Well, my weird history with The Last of Us essentially allowed me to do so. I only started watching it a few weeks after it started airing because initially I didn't have the means to watch this show. If you don't know, HBO Max is not available in Canada, so if I, as a Canadian, wanted to watch this show, it would have to be through Crave. For the uninitiated, Crave is a Canadian streaming service. It's owned by Bell and it's got exclusive Canadian access to programming, Bell original programming, and major suppliers like Warner Brothers and Paramount. But Crave's biggest drawing factor is that it has an exclusive deal with HBO. That means that in Canada, every HBO original is on Crave and Crave only, meaning that if I wanted to watch The Last of Us legally, I would have to pay for Crave. Yes, this singular show had me forking over money for a whole new streaming service that I never thought I would buy. So on Wednesday, February 8th, I got an annual subscription to Crave, and it might be one of the silliest purchases I've ever made. I should say that this section of the video isn't about The Last of Us at all. No, this is a rant about Crave that no one asked for yet everyone is getting. So if you don't care, go ahead and skip to the chapter of the video where I actually start talking about The Last of Us, because this is going to be the dumbest part of the video, and I completely understand if you couldn't be bothered to be here for it. The Crave interface is terrible. It looks awful. It looks like some grade 10 student in a coding class made it in like an hour. It looks like what a streaming service might have looked like in 2010. The home screen itself is just painfully below average, but you know what's really terrible? The goddamn video player. The picture itself is fine. I mean, I'd expect it to be if I'm paying for it, but the player looks like I'm using an illegal site. You cannot tell me that this doesn't look like 123 Movies. What the hell is this? This is some Solar Movie shit. Look at the subtitles! That is Go Movies level subtitles right there. I swear, if I replaced the Crave logo in the corner with 123 Movies, you wouldn't bat an eye. It's actually so unacceptable how disgusting the Crave interface is, especially considering this goddamn site has the audacity to charge $20 Canadian per month. $20 Canadian in this economy for this crap? For $20 Canadian, I'm expecting a Netflix-level interface, but instead I get a variation of Solar Movie. And you might think, hey, it's gotta be better on the TV, right? I mean, nope, it's still bad. This is me scrolling through the Crave homepage on the TV. It looks like it's lagging. It's not. This is just what it looks like. Look, I've used my fair share of bad streaming services. Disney Plus annoys me to no end. Prime Video has made strides to update its interface, but it's still not amazing. But neither of those can compare to Crave. Crave is the bane of my existence. Funnily enough, Crave initially started out in 2014 as a low-cost streaming service that was a monthly $4 add-on to traditional television services already provided by Bell. By 2015, they offered over-the-top service, so directly over the internet, but it wasn't until 2018 when Crave added their exclusive deal with HBO. In fact, this was around the time when I really started to hear about Crave. After Game of Thrones ended terribly in 2019, Crave must have had some sort of major marketing campaign, because I was suddenly seeing it everywhere, advertising that they had all these HBO originals, including the recently abysmally ended Game of Thrones. I'm willing to bet that the package including HBO is the one that most of its customers have. So of course, it's also the most expensive one at $20 Canadian. I will keep reminding you of that price. You know, it makes sense that Crave started as a low-cost streaming service, because if you showed me this interface and asked me what I thought it was worth, I would say, nothing, that should be free. But if you insisted I named a price, then I would say anything more than $5 is too much. It's like they forgot that as they increased the price, they also had to update the site. I'm sorry, I feel the need to reiterate that Crave has an exclusive deal with HBO. The streaming service that looks like an illegal site and costs about 3 hours of work at a minimum wage job per month got an exclusive deal with HBO. Whoever at Crave masterminded that deal absolutely deserves a raise. And whoever at HBO accepted that deal, why? Like, what did Crave offer you? I would have loved to be in the room where that deal went down, okay? I'm in my Aaron Burr arc. I want to be in the room where that happened. Because let's be honest, if Crave didn't have the HBO deal, it would be nothing right now. It would have gotten lost in the other Canadian streaming services dreamt up by Canadian television providers trying to capitalize off of streaming culture. It would have ended up like Show Me. Don't act like you know what Show Me is, you're not fooling anyone. I will say one thing in Crave's favor, which is that it does have a section dedicated to French originals, which is pretty cool and useful to me. I'm currently pursuing a minor in French, and it's always helpful to watch movies and TV in your target language. I especially appreciate that most of the stuff on here is made in Quebec. It highlights Quebecois artists, and I'm always trying to improve my understanding of Quebecois French. But that is the only good thing I can say about Crave. The fact of the matter is that it's only still in business because of HBO. And you know what? Crave doesn't even need to update its interface because they probably realize that as long as HBO keeps putting out bangers, people will keep paying for Crave, no matter what it looks like. And that makes me want to drive a pencil through my thigh. This purchase? Silly. This was such a silly, goofy, haha purchase of mine. I really can't describe it any other way. This is the silliest money I have ever spent, and I once spent $20 on drinks from the alley, which I absolutely hated, so I immediately spent $20 more on drinks from Kung Fu Tea. That purchase was less silly than buying an annual subscription to Crave. Sure, wasting that money on drinks might send me to hell, but buying a Crave subscription has brought hell to me on Earth. Okay, now that I've gotten that out of my system, let's actually get to what this video is supposed to be about. As we discuss The Last of Us, keep in mind my weird history with it. I knew about the game, but not enough, so I won't be making much reference to the original game. Most of what I have to say will be limited to the show. This is your official spoiler warning, so if you haven't seen it, go and watch it, and then come back. The pilot episode of The Last of Us is one of my favorite pilots that I've seen. It's so expertly written. After a frightening cold open set in 1968, during which scientists debate how debilitating the effects of a fungal infection could be to the human race, we're introduced to Joel and Sarah Miller in 2003, a father and daughter living in Texas. Sarah and Joel clearly have an effortlessly loving relationship. And from the very beginning, Sarah is set up as the protagonist of the show. We follow her through her day as she has a birthday breakfast with her father, goes to school, gets Joel's watch fixed, and spends time baking with her neighbors. She grows on the audience so easily. Sarah is a bright spot. You want to follow her for the rest of the show, which makes her death halfway through the pilot that much more jarring and that much more devastating. Again, I knew from the game that Sarah would die, but I totally forgot how it happened. I was under the impression that she would get infected, but no, she gets shot by a soldier. It happens so quickly that it stuns you. One moment she's okay, and the next her guts are pouring out. The shock of it really puts you in Joel's position. Sarah's death is slow and brutal. Joel is forced to watch as his daughter bleeds out in his arms, and he is powerless to save her. Holy shit, Nico Parker and Pedro Pascal are phenomenal. You can feel the sheer terror and excruciating pain they're both experiencing. Watching this for the first time was so difficult, I genuinely felt like I had to step away from the episode before continuing. What a way to open a show. And that can be said for all the scenes depicting the outbreak. The Last of Us has one of the most harrowing and realistic portrayals of the early stages of an apocalypse of any other apocalypse story I've ever seen. It is genuinely terrifying. The whole episode does a great job of building up that something is not right, with a lot of planes flying overhead, heightened police activity, and the old neighbor twitching up a storm behind Sarah. But when things actually hit the fan, they hit the fan. First of all, can you imagine waking up alone in your house with helicopters all around and emergency messaging on the TV? That's terrifying. And it only gets worse with the scenes of chaos on the streets, fires burning, and planes literally falling out of the sky. There is such an intense feeling of dread perforating through the sequence of the Miller family trying to get out of town. I felt sick to my stomach, which isn't surprising to me, seeing as The Last of Us is created by Craig Mazin, who previously did Chernobyl. Chernobyl is a 2019 HBO miniseries. I had to watch the show for a course I took last semester, and at first I was excited because I had been meaning to watch it for a while, and now I finally had the perfect reason. But then I sat down to watch it, and I quit after the first episode. Not because it's bad, but because it's too good. Chernobyl was able to build the most intense dread. It was astounding. I was so terrified by it, I felt sick. I'm not exaggerating. I had to watch it through my fingers over my eyes like a comical depiction of a child watching a horror movie. There are few things I find more terrifying in this world than nuclear power, and Chernobyl reminded me why that is. Look, I will mess with scary stuff in media. Serial killers, fine. Zombies, sure. But nuclear power is where I draw the line, and I have Chernobyl to thank for making me realize that. It is the only show I have ever quit on because it was too scary. Having said that, the one and only episode I watched was incredible, so I recommend the show if you can stomach it. I, however, am perfectly fine with never returning to that nightmare ever again. The kind of dread generated in The Last of Us's outbreak scene is on par with Chernobyl's, although I found Chernobyl to be worse because nuclear power. Watching Joel, Tommy, and Sarah desperately try to find a way to safety while the world falls apart around them is haunting. Like I said earlier, what a way to open a show. I want to talk about the world of The Last of Us. It's incredibly well thought out, interesting, and I guess as realistic as we can imagine in a scenario like this. It makes sense that there would be some systems in place to protect the remaining population. As much as I like other post-apocalyptic fiction where all of society has broken down, it's not always the most realistic. The Last of Us's world seems plausible, which only makes it all the more impactful. Of course there would be an emergency response agency trying to quell the spread. Of course they would be bad at it. I think if the past couple years have proven anything to us, and really if any sort of mass sickness throughout history has proven anything to us, it's that we are not equipped to deal with crippling infection, so we would be even less equipped to deal with one that makes the infected violently attack others. Of course the response to such an infection would be morally questionable, but also sadly expected. Soldiers being ordered to kill anyone and everyone they come across regardless of whether or not they're infected, a government dropping bombs on its own people, and a disaster response agency killing the excess population they can't fit into quarantine zones are all things that I'm not surprised happened. Fedra ending up as an authoritarian entity also makes a lot of sense in the context of this world. In the early days of a disaster as crippling as the cordyceps infection, people need some sort of order. Otherwise, a bad situation will turn even worse. The combination of collective panic and a breakdown of everything that made society relatively civil is more than enough to cause terrible things. When people are scared for their lives, they will do anything to protect themselves, and things can go very badly very quickly. In the beginning, Fedra implementing their rules to fight the infection was necessary to keep the healthy population healthy. But with enough time, what started as a strict organization trying to keep people safe can morph into a wholly authoritarian regime drunk on its own power. Absolute power corrupts absolutely, or whatever. So the world of The Last of Us makes a lot of sense within QZ walls, but also outside of them. The rest of the world is living in anarchy. When there are no laws, anything and everything is fair game, allowing people to do whatever they need to stay alive, but also allowing people with already bad intentions to thrive. Of course there are raiders. Of course there are slavers. It's all logical within the context of the world. Okay, let's talk about our main characters, because they are the heart of this show and a huge reason it is what it is. When we first meet Joel in 2003, he's a very caring father, even if he is a little bit of a mess sometimes. He and Sarah share a close bond, with Sarah often stepping up to help Joel out and keep him in check.
Alarm! Alarm! Vitamin C.
Joel is a family man. He's a good father and older brother. 20 years after Sarah's death, Joel is a completely different person. The caring father he once was has turned into a hardened, unsympathetic survivor with little capacity for hope or affection. Joel does not give a shit, my guy. Look at him. You think he has any shits to give? Joel does not care. He has nothing to care about. He's living life on autopilot, going through the motions because he has to. Really, he died 20 years ago with Sarah. The person he is now is a harder, darker shadow of what he used to be. Joel is also terrifying now. I love that the first thing we hear about him is from a dealer, Robert, who is scared out of his mind that Joel will come after him when he sees the wounds he and his men gave Tess. That's all the expectations we need for him as a character. He scares the living daylights out of other people. Because Joel is not necessarily a good person. Tess says as much of both herself and Joel in the second episode, and as the series continues, we learn the extent to what Joel has done during the apocalypse. He's been a raider. He's killed innocent people. He is not a picture of morality. And even before Sarah died, we already get to see that he has the mind of a fighter and a survivor. As he, Tommy, and Sarah try to find safety in 2003, Joel insists that they not stop to help people by the road, and he doesn't care if they drive over people in town. He doesn't even take a second to think about it. It's always been him and his loved ones first, screw everyone else, which is a mentality that has only been exacerbated by the 20 years he spent living in this world. Ellie was born years after the outbreak of the cordyceps infection, so this world is the only one she's ever known. As an orphan, she's been raised by Fedra in their military school and really has no one in her life to give her unconditional love the way a parent might have. There are Fedra officials that see her potential, but they don't actually consider her as a person, only as someone who can carry on Fedra's rule in the future. I think it's important to note here that Ellie is not Sarah at all. Sarah was soft. She was kind and thoughtful, inoffensive, well-meaning, easy to like. She considered other people's feelings, whether it was making breakfast for Joel on his birthday or spending time with the neighbors even though she didn't really want to. Above all, she had such a palpable love for her father, and he for her. Sarah was a regular teenage girl raised in a regular world. Ellie is the complete opposite. Ellie is rude. She's kind of annoying and a little immature, but she's also combative, antagonistic, has a capacity for violence, swears like a sailor, and has no filter. Ellie is not necessarily an easy person to like, unlike Sarah, as a result of her upbringing in a messed up world with no one to care for her, where she has spent all her years training to be the next generation of a fascist authority. These clear differences between Sarah and Ellie make the progression of Joel and Ellie's relationship so endearing. For one thing, I doubt Joel would ever have allowed himself to get as close to Ellie as he does if she had been exactly like Sarah. It would have been too difficult, a pale reminder of everything he lost. For another, Ellie being so very different to Sarah makes sure neither of them drowns out the other. Joel doesn't replace Sarah as a daughter, he just gains another one, and that's important. It could have been easy to accidentally have Ellie overshadow Sarah, but The Last of Us avoids that by making them opposite kinds of people that play off the two distinct versions of Joel. Joel and Ellie are also immediately so fun to watch together. Petulant, slightly annoying daughter and her gruff, hardened father is the best trope, go argue with the wall, and Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey pull it off insanely well. They have such amazing and immediate chemistry.
Where'd you learn to do that?
The circus.
Neither particularly wants to be in this situation. Joel keeps his distance and is reluctant to take on Ellie since his primary motivation is finding Tommy, but also because even though it's been 20 years since he's had a kid in his care, he still has an inherent sense of fatherhood in him. If he gets close to this kid, then loses her, whether because he has to hand her over to the Fireflies or, heaven forbid, if she dies, it'll be all over for him. Joel cannot lose another daughter. He wouldn't survive it. Ellie, on the other hand, has never had an adult in her life who actually cared for her and protected her. She's an orphan, and she's grown up in a Fedra facility run by adults who only care about her as a future Fedra employee. The only bit of companionship she ever had was Riley, which came to a bitter, tragic end. No adult has ever acted like they should around her, which is why the ending of the first episode hits so hard. As Joel, Tess, and Ellie escape the QZ, they're apprehended by a Fedra soldier Joel was training with earlier. When he goes to check them for cordyceps, Ellie, knowing the reader would show her to be infected, stabs him impulsively, leading to him holding Joel and Ellie at gunpoint. Staring down the barrel of this gun with a 14-year-old girl behind him, something in Joel snaps. Before the soldier can shoot, he beats the man to death as Ellie watches on. Now, she watches Joel commit this horrifically violent act. She seems to be entranced by it. I'd go so far as to say she's enamored by this. There are a couple things I love about the scene. The first is the obvious parallel to the scene earlier in the episode that leads to Sarah's death. In that scene, Joel was too slow to act, and it cost him everything. 20 years later, he finds himself in the same situation, and this time, he doesn't stop to think. He just does. This girl that he doesn't even know suddenly becomes Sarah, and he does what he should have done, what he no doubt wishes he'd done 20 years ago. It's a beautiful parallel that sets up where the relationship between Joel and Ellie will end up. The second part about this that I love is Ellie. She is so taken by this extremely violent action. At first, I didn't know how to feel about this, as her reaction felt out of place in this scene. When a kid witnesses something this vicious, you'd think their reaction would be one of shock and horror. But Ellie has the exact opposite reaction. And it wasn't until I thought about it more that I realized how genius this is, because Ellie's reaction to witnessing Joel be violent is a direct contrast to Sarah's. When cordyceps really breaks out, Sarah is alone in the house, as Joel has gone into town to bail Tommy out of jail. When Joel and Tommy return to get her, they're met with their infected neighbor, who Joel kills. Sarah is horrified by this. Her sweet, loving father murdered their neighbor without blinking an eye. Even though it was necessary to save their own lives, she can't believe what she just witnessed, and she's terrified by it. And then there's Ellie, who watches Joel viciously beat the life out of a man with awe. She's not horrified by it the way Sarah was. No, she likes it, and it tells you so much about her. 1, she needs therapy. Holy shit, go to therapy, girl. And 2, no one has ever stood up for her like this. An adult has never protected her with such vigor before, and she likes that someone finally is. This kind of protection is a new experience for her, and it's what she's always desperately wanted. Technically, Joel didn't have to kill this guy. He could have stopped hitting him once he had incapacitated him, but he ends up beating him to death. Contrast that with him killing their neighbor, which you can argue was necessary. Whereas a necessary act of violence horrifies Sarah, an optional one enamors Ellie. It shows her that when it comes down to it, Joel will protect her with his life. But at this point, he's still protecting her as a job. If she dies, he doesn't get his car battery. I think this is partially why she's drawn more to Tess initially. While Tess is also hardened like Joel, she maintains a level of affection that she can extend to Ellie, which Joel doesn't. For Ellie, the days she spent with them were probably as close to a traditional family she's ever experienced. Mother, father, child. It's a weird family, for sure. Two hard-ass smugglers that don't fully acknowledge their feelings for each other and don't really want Ellie there, but it's close enough nonetheless. The kindness Tess shows Ellie is connected to her representing something for Tess that she had almost given up on. Hope. For a cure, for the future, for a potential end to this nightmarish world they live in. Tess still has the capacity for hope, so she has the capacity for affection towards Ellie. Joel both has no capacity for hope and previous trauma from the loss of Sarah, so he cannot extend any sort of compassion to Ellie. And then Tess gets infected. The person Joel is closest to is suddenly ripped away from him. His sadness turns into anger, which he is quick to direct towards Ellie. Tess wouldn't have gotten infected if they hadn't had Ellie on their hands. Of course, this anger is misplaced, we know it, and even Joel himself knows it to some extent, but it's another obstacle standing between Joel and Ellie. Ellie has to work to break through his defenses. She does so with her chaotic energy, inherent childish charm, and dumb puns.
I stayed up all night, wondering where the sun went. And then it dawned on me.
Feel free to wait in the truck.
And as much as Joel doesn't want to, he finds himself warming up to her because, like I mentioned earlier, there is an inherent sense of fatherhood in him. In episode 3, Bill refers to Joel as a protector, and he's right. Joel is a protector, and the longer he protects this girl, the more she starts to mean to him. It's great. I love the way these characters and their dynamic is set up. Every aspect of their characters informs why they're initially at odds, but also informs why they become as close as they do. They each fulfill for the other some fundamental thing they lack. Also, you can't go through the stuff that Joel and Ellie do together and not end up caring for each other. They cross the country together, fight together, keep each other alive, save each other, and, scariest of all, endure terrible puns together.
Did you know diarrhea is hereditary? It runs in your genes.
That is so goddamn stupid.
You laughed, motherfucker.
I didn't laugh.
I also think there's something so special about Joel being the person to teach Ellie about the world. This is the first time Ellie has ever been outside of the QZ, so everything is new to her.
Well, I didn't know how to swim.
Seriously?
Do you think we have pools in the QZ?
No, smartass. I mean...
I didn't know how I was supposed to know that.
She's never been in a car or a hotel, and the idea of flying in a plane is so foreign and exciting to her. Even more importantly, Joel is her first objective source of information on cordyceps. He's the one to teach her about the early days of the outbreak, information that Fedra has heavily censored, and he's the one to teach her to fight off clickers. I especially love this because as kids, we learn about the world from our parents, so it seems fitting that Joel does this for Ellie. Even while he still considers her a job, he's already reverting back into the role of a parent, even if he doesn't realize it. As the months go by, Joel starts to teach Ellie things more personal to him. He teaches her how to navigate through the world safely, how to shoot, and by the end of the season even wants to give her guitar lessons. It's a really endearing detail about their relationship. In Kansas City, Joel and Ellie are ambushed by raiders, resulting in a shootout. As Ellie hides out on Joel's orders, Joel manages to take out the other raiders, but is caught off guard by one. Ellie has to save his life by shooting the attacker, an action that clearly traumatizes her. Instead of comforting her in the moment, Joel only orders her to hide again so he can finish the attacker off. I love Ellie's reaction to this. She's disturbed by the violence, but only allows herself a few tears before she swipes them away and forces herself to get it together. It's so interesting to me because it's a representation of what growing up in this world is like, but it's also a show of how similar Ellie and Joel actually are. Joel does not linger. He does what needs to be done and is relatively unaffected by it. Ellie is more affected, but at the end of the day will push those emotions down because it's imperative for her survival. It reminds me of the way Joel insisted that they never speak about Tess. Part of it is his grief at losing her, but it's also because he can't keep thinking about her, not if he wants to survive and fulfill the promise he made her. He has someone that needs him now, and if he's going to keep Ellie alive, he has to compartmentalize. Eventually, Joel and Ellie make it to Jackson, Wyoming, where they find Tommy safe and living in a commune. My favorite part of these early interactions between Joel and Tommy is Ellie's reaction. When Joel first hugs Tommy, Ellie watches them with uncertainty, and when Joel leaves Ellie with Maria to spend some time with Tommy, she is clearly upset and becomes pretty standoffish with Maria. Until this point, I'm willing to bet she just assumed that Joel is not an outwardly affectionate person. Not everybody is, and that's fine. Ellie has seen how Joel keeps people at arm's length, even Tess, who he clearly had some sort of relationship with. So even though the two of them are much closer now and definitely care for each other, it doesn't bother her when he doesn't show more affection. She assumes that this is just how he loves. But then they find Tommy, and suddenly Ellie is shown a whole new side of Joel, one that shows affection openly. Now that she realizes this side of him does exist, it starts to make her rethink her own relationship with Joel. If he truly cared for her, why has he never shown that kind of affection to her? I think she's kind of jealous of the familial closeness Joel shows to Tommy. This is the kind of love she's never gotten from anyone. She may have started to get it from Joel, but she's not sure anymore. On top of that, Joel made it clear from the beginning of their trek that his primary goal was to find Tommy. It's the whole reason he took on the task of smuggling Ellie out of the quarantine zone. He literally said that he keeps going for family and that Ellie is not that. So now that Joel has achieved his goal, for Ellie, she's not only jealous of that familial closeness, but also worried about what this means for her. Joel has done what he set out to do. Technically, there's no reason for him to stick with her. So when Ellie overhears Joel convincing Tommy to take her instead, it confirms her worst fears, that once again, another adult in her life doesn't care about her enough. But we're privy to what Ellie isn't, which is that Joel does genuinely care for her, and it's that very care that paralyzes him. He starts having panic attacks with the fear of losing her. He starts imagining Sarah, and he keeps having nightmares about losing Ellie. The scene where Joel finally breaks down and spills his fears to Tommy is incredible. Pedro Pascal gives it his all. You can't watch this and not feel his sheer love and fear.
I have dreams.
What kind of dreams?
I don't know. I can't remember. I just know that when I wake up, I've lost something.
After Sarah died, nothing mattered to him anymore. It wasn't important to him whether he lived or died. He had nothing to really care about, which is why we meet him as the cold, uncaring man on autopilot who gives zero shits. But now, for the first time in 20 years, Joel has something to lose again, and it terrifies him how much he cares about Ellie. Love invites pain, love invites loss, and he cannot suffer another loss. The confrontation between Joel and Ellie is really emotional. It's the first time Ellie is truly vulnerable with Joel. She's desperate to change his mind, to make him see why she needs him so much. He's the only person in her life who hasn't left her or died. And she feels safe when she's with him, something she's never felt. But in trying to express herself, she trips Joel's triggers by mentioning Sarah. You can see the change in Pedro Pascal's face. He completely shuts down, and from that moment on, he's not there to listen.
I'm not her, you know. Maria told me about Sarah and...
No. Don't say another word.
A similar thing happens with Ellie when Joel says that she doesn't understand what loss is. That shift in Bella Ramsey's face, you can see the pain that caused her. As if all of that isn't bad enough, Joel ends the conversation with probably the most painful thing he can say and that Ellie can hear.
You're not my daughter. And I sure as hell ain't your dad.
That is such a slap to the face, especially for Ellie, who has only ever wanted someone to care about her. I mean, look at her face, it just shatters my heart. The next morning, Tommy and Ellie find Joel in the stables, where he gives her the choice of who to go with, and she picks Joel without hesitation.
I still think you'd be better off with Tommy.
Let's go.
Okay.
I love how this little thing brings them back together. After thinking about Sarah the previous night, I feel like though Joel doesn't want to lose Ellie, he realizes that not going with her is also a form of losing her. Ellie's feeling of Joel abandoning her is rectified the second he lets her pick who she wants to go with. And I love that Joel stalled in the stables for a half hour. Even if he wants to leave, he can't. He knows he cannot let her go. Such a simple scene fixes everything between them. The cards are on the table now. They finally know explicitly that each cares about the other. So when they set off to the university on horseback, it's adorable. They're so unmistakably father-daughter. Ellie finally has someone who's there for her no matter what, and Joel finally gets to be a dad again. It's so cute. They deserve the world. But of course, good things can't last. Joel is severely injured after a raider attack. It's looking so bad for him that he insists that Ellie leave him to go back to Tommy. It's especially painful as Ellie has just gained a surrogate father and he's about to be ripped away from her, the same way everyone else has been. As Joel slowly bleeds out, we get to explore Ellie's past with Riley. First of all, I like Riley a lot. Characters grow on you very easily in this show, which I'll talk more about later, but Riley becomes so endearing so quickly. You can tell how much love she and Ellie have for each other. Watching them have the most magical, wondrous night in the mall puts so much warmth in your chest. It feels like you're hanging out with your crush, and you're in that position where you don't exactly know if they like you back. There's a Tagalog word that my best friend taught me, kilig, which is like exhilaration or excitement stemming from a romantic experience, and that is totally what you get watching Ellie and Riley together. It's the best way to describe it. Look at them! My little baby lesbians! So much kilig! But of course, some of that kilig is undercut by the knowledge that things will go very badly during this night. We've already heard Ellie and Marlene reference Riley with a very somber air, and we already know from earlier on in the show that Ellie got infected after breaking into the mall in the QZ, which has been expressly sealed off due to it being filled with infected. So when we actually see the single infected still in the mall, it confirms our dread. When Ellie and Riley inevitably get attacked, they manage to kill the infected, but not before it bites both of them. God, what a tragic moment. They've just kissed and confirmed their feelings for each other, and it all gets taken away in an instant. No! Bella Ramsey and Storm Reid are just so good. I will keep referring back to how strong these performances are because I was genuinely taken aback by them. I love the contrast in their reactions to realizing they're infected. While Ellie loses it, Riley is just numb. And it's Riley that suggests that instead of ending it now, the two of them should be all poetic and lose their minds together. And they do. They cling on to each other for as long as they can. It's a heartbreaking ending to their story and explains so much about why Ellie is the way she is when we first meet her. I know some people had issues with this episode, namely feeling like it was boring or just filler, and I have to colossally disagree. Episode 7 does for Ellie what Episode 1 does for Joel. It characterizes her deeper and gives us that much more insight into the kinds of unjust loss she suffered, while also giving us a closer look at what growing up under Fedra was like for her. She goes from siding more with Fedra and parroting, if not fully buying, the anti-Firefly propaganda, to willingly traveling across the country to aid the Fireflies. Not only that, but it also makes so much sense to me that we get this look into Ellie's past when we do. With Joel down for the count, Ellie is once more faced with the tragic probability of losing yet another person important to her. Using Joel dying in the present as a framing device to explore the last great loss she suffered is really effective, and it makes her decision to stay with Joel that much more powerful. She stays because of Riley's mentality. Even if they don't have a lot of time, she's going to grasp every second she can get. She's going to stay with Joel, fight with Joel, until the very end. That moment they look at each other holding hands before Ellie stitches his wound, geez man, it makes me want to cry. Yeah, the episode isn't perfect. It's probably one of my least favorite of the season, but that by no means it's bad. It's like trying to rank all of the Lindor flavors. Sure, some are not as good, but at the end of the day, you're still eating Lindor chocolate. It is very badass of Ellie to stitch Joel up and keep him alive, but also, we all agree that it's a miracle he didn't die, right? Like, my guy got stabbed and immediately pulled the weapon out of his wound. Babes, you gotta leave that in to keep the blood in your body. And then a child stitched him up with a filthy needle and thread without knowing how, and blindly administered him 2 thingies of penicillin right to the wound. It is incredible that he didn't die. While Joel is still unwell, Ellie is left to her own devices with David and his culty town. David, oh god. The moment this man opened his mouth and started speaking, I got the biggest ick. And at first, I couldn't place exactly what about him gave me the ick, but the red flag was hoisted high and waving in the wind. And for good reason. With Joel hurt, Ellie is the one to have to save them both. Ellie is the one to lead them away from Joel, giving him enough time to get his shit together. His child was quiet for too long. He knew something was wrong. The longer Ellie spends with David, the more horrifying he becomes. As if cannibalism isn't bad enough, of course he's also a skilled manipulator and a predator. I think it takes Ellie a little longer to catch on to this than it took me, for example, because, well, I live in this world and Ellie lives in hers. That's not to say that bad people with bad intentions don't exist in her world. Of course they do, the literal government being part of them. But when you've got infected roaming about, it's probably not at the top of everyone's lists to teach kids about stranger danger. Especially for Ellie, who has no parents or any experienced adult who actually cares about her well-being. Yet the fact that Ellie eventually does catch on to what David wants is also telling. This kind of thing is unfortunately going to be a real concern in any iteration of our world. It's why a lot of women on TikTok have been saying that if an apocalypse actually did happen, they'd rather off themselves in the first few minutes than have to live in a world with no laws. And you know what? Sounds pretty good to me. I love that Ellie uses her wits to save herself from David and James.
You had your chance!
No! I'm infected!
I'm infected. And now so are you.
It catches them off guard, allowing Ellie to buy herself the time and the means to fight them. She's smart, and I think it goes to show why she and Joel have lived this long, and why they're such a good team. They've each got a good balance of brains and brawn, and in whatever areas one might be lacking, the other not only makes up for, but teaches them how to cultivate. This is also how I know for sure that I would not survive in a post-apocalyptic world, because if I was Ellie, I would never have thought to say that I was infected. Okay, there is nothing going on in my brain. Through the second half of this episode, we're set up to believe that Joel will save Ellie. He's back from the dead and doing everything in his power to find her.
What town?
That's how these things go. When the conflict reaches its head, Joel will swoop in and save Ellie. But that's not what happens. He doesn't get to her in time. Instead, Ellie has to kill David herself, and oh boy, does she kill him. Honestly, so warranted. Like, the most warranted reaction of the entire series. Bella Ramsey blew me away. Again, she perfectly captured the desperation and horror you'd feel in this moment. Also, there are some people saying that Ellie was only scared of David because of the prospect of being eaten, and once again, I have to disrespectfully and colossally disagree. Sure, being eaten is scary, but you know what's arguably scarier? The shit that David wanted to do to her. And to the people saying that David only wanted to help Ellie and wasn't even that bad of a guy, go to therapy, please, for the love of God. Anyway, Joel doesn't save Ellie physically. She does all the heavy lifting herself, which is severely traumatizing. Like, she is not going to be the same person after this level of traumatizing. And when she's in her worst moment, that is when Joel finds her. It's so powerful that he saves her emotionally, because that is what these characters are to each other. Each is the other's emotional savior, and this is maybe the perfect representation of that in the series. He is there for her when she is at her weakest.
It's okay, baby girl. I got you. I got you.
And of course, Joel calling Ellie his baby girl, solidifying that he's his daughter, just wrecks me. He says those words again for the first time in 20 years, and you feel that he has a daughter once more, one that he came so close to losing again, but didn't. That hug is for the both of them. Also, it breaks my heart to see Ellie's face as they walk away. That girl is gone. Now that she's safe, she has just shut down, which is both tragic and goes to show how much she trusts Joel with her life. She has no idea where they're going, I can say that for a fact, but just being with him tells her that she'll be okay. From then on, she's a different person. The beginning of episode 9 reintroduces Ellie to us as a quieter, older person. A lot of her childish charm has been replaced with a much more grown attitude, and Joel can see this change. This makes the giraffe scene so sweet because for a second, the old Ellie reappears. Joel watches her feed the giraffe with such tenderness and remembers the girl that still lives in her deep down. And of course, the scene where Joel opens up to Ellie about his attempt is beautifully done.
So time heals all wounds, I guess.
It wasn't time that did it.
Their reactions, man. It's a huge thing for Ellie to mean so much to another person. She feels the weight of that. It's all she's ever wanted. She gets the father she always wanted and understands that she has given Joel another chance at having a daughter. Overall, I love the progression of Joel and Ellie's relationship. They really hold this show together. Though Joel and Ellie are the emotional through line of The Last of Us, the show's side characters leave no less of an impact. The Last of Us makes it so easy to care for characters. I found myself falling so deeply in love with characters in such a short period of time. I love that Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann said, hey, this is a show about zombies, so let's tell a beautiful gay love story. And they did exactly that. Episode 3, titled Long Long Time, follows Joel and Ellie in the present as they make their way to Bill and Frank's, but uses a majority of its runtime to tell the story of Bill and Frank's relationship through the years. Their story is beautiful. A hard-ass doomsday prepper accidentally catches a kind, generous man in one of his traps, and then they fall in love. It's sweet how soft and nervous Bill is around Frank at first, especially when you realize he's probably lived the majority of his life closeted. And Frank slowly putting 2 and 2 together about Bill. Mans has a world-class gaydar, I'll say that. Side note, someone on TikTok joked that Joel has a terrible gaydar, and I completely agree. That's my headcanon now. He has no idea that his child is a lesbian. It makes so much sense and is hilarious to me. Look at him! You think he knows? No! He has not a single clue. Of course he'd love Ellie unconditionally, but I find it so goddamn funny that that man has no idea his daughter is a lesbian. It is the most adorable father energy, and I love it. Anyway, back to it. In a way, Bill and Frank live better lives during the apocalypse than they did before. The end of the world for everyone else becomes the start of theirs. They're able to live together openly and freely. They support each other, they cultivate their passions, and even find friends in Tess and Joel.
I've actually been talking to a nice woman on the radio.
You what?
For the most part, they're able to live their sweet little lives in peace. So while the end of their story is sad to watch, I don't really see it as a tragic ending. Bill and Frank lived happy, fulfilled lives together for almost 20 years, which is better than a lot of people get. They each found true love and went out on their own terms, together. Now, was this Bill and Frank short film absolutely necessary to the narrative of The Last of Us? No. But am I glad we still got it? Definitely. Technically, we didn't need this. Again, I don't remember much from the game, but I'm pretty sure this is a show-only edition. But just because it's not imperative to the show's main narrative doesn't mean it's bad. It's like adding chocolate syrup to your bowl of ice cream. Necessary? No. Good? Absolutely. The story could have been told without it, but it's a good addition. I think it fleshes out the world of this show so much. So far, we've only seen what life is like in the QZs, but there are people out there living completely different lives. Bill and Frank's story allows us a glimpse into a part of this world we wouldn't have gotten from Joel and Ellie. On top of that, it gives us insight into Bill and Frank as people, making them feel like real, rounded characters. So when Joel and Ellie eventually make it to their house and realize they're dead, you can feel the weight that has on Joel. These friends he's had for almost 20 years are gone. In the span of a few days, he's lost almost everything he's held onto during the apocalypse. Tess is dead, he has no idea what happened to Tommy, and now Bill and Frank are gone too. All he has left is this child he's suddenly been handed. Just another layer as to why their eventual familial bond is as good as it is. They are each the only people left in the world that matter to them. So if you don't like the Bill and Frank storyline in episode 3, you're entitled to your opinion, but also grow up. And if you don't like it for other reasons, just see yourself out. I do not have the time. Henry and Sam are the other set of side characters I really want to talk about. When Joel and Ellie make it to Kansas City, they find themselves in the middle of a successful revolution's early days. The rebel leader Kathleen is on the hunt for one Henry Burrell and his brother Sam. Henry gave up the previous rebel leader, Kathleen's brother, to Fedra in exchange for Sam's leukemia medication, and Kathleen wants to avenge the death of her brother. Henry and Sam make their first appearance at the end of episode 4, a cliffhanger in which they hold Joel and Ellie at gunpoint, but the beginning of episode 5 tracks back to before Joel and Ellie even arrive in the city, and we follow Henry and Sam as they navigate the newly fallen QZ and hide out from Kathleen and the other revolutionaries. This is what I mean when I say it is so easy to fall in love with The Last of Us' side characters. The prologue of this episode is maybe 15 minutes in duration, but in those 15 minutes, the show effectively introduces us to Henry and Sam and gets the audience to sympathize with them by building their brotherly dynamic. We learn very quickly that Sam is Henry's world. He will do anything for him. Because of their age difference and Henry being the only person Sam can easily communicate with, Henry is more like a father to Sam. Henry, while still young in his own right, has to do the impossible task of saving them both. On the flip side, Sam, being only 8 years old, doesn't fully know what's happening in the city or why they're hiding, but knows Henry would never do anything to put him in danger. He wants to be brave for Henry. They are so wonderful to watch together, and you can't help but root for them. Seriously, within the 15 minutes we spend with them before they encounter Joel and Ellie, I fell so hard for them that I literally said, if either of these characters die, we will have a big problem, HBO. And guess what? We have a very big problem, HBO. Henry and Sam are able to recruit Joel and Ellie to help them get out of the city. I mean, Joel and Ellie are in pretty bad state too, seeing as Joel killed one of the revolutionaries and Kathleen wants justice for that too. So their best bet is to help each other. They narrowly escape both the revolutionaries and a horde of infected. Oh my god, ew, get it away from me! And when they settle down for the night, Joel and Henry talk.
You think they'll be okay?
Yeah, I think. It's easier when you're a kid anyway.
This is pretty much the opposite of what you'd expect a character to say. I think we all agree that continuously experiencing horrific violence at a young age would not do good things for a child's development, and Joel would too. We know he feels guilty that Ellie had to shoot that raider to save him, and the aftermath is the first time where they get vulnerable with each other, even if it's just for a moment. Joel can't not make sure she's okay. He's too much of a father. So his statement here, that it's easier when you're young, is interesting, because I think it points to a major aspect of his character. I think he means that when you're young, it's both easier to put out of your mind, but you're also allowed to be hurt by it. When you're young, you don't have people relying on you. You don't have to keep it together for them. Sure, Ellie and Sam seem unaffected by it right now, but if at any point they are affected by it, they can feel those feelings. Joel and Henry can't, because if they fall apart, then Ellie and Sam are goners. It goes back to the compartmentalizing I spoke about before. This is how Joel and Henry keep Ellie and Sam alive. Later on, Sam confides to Ellie that he's been bit and he's scared. To comfort him, Ellie rubs some of her blood on his wound since she's immune, but of course it does nothing. By the next morning, the infection has taken hold of Sam. He attacks Ellie and Henry shoots him to save her. God, I don't want to talk about this. It just makes me so sad. In complete shock and horror at what he just did, Henry shoots himself. It is a tragic end to these two characters, one that both Joel and Ellie are shaken by, and I think it starts to really inject Joel with fear. He spends a day with Henry and Sam and already finds himself connecting to them just a bit. Their deaths are a harsh reminder of the risk of connecting to other people in this world. They can be taken away in the blink of an eye. It's the very pain Joel has guarded himself against for 20 years after Sarah's death, and the threat of it hangs over him and strengthens the more time he spends with Ellie. The parallels between these two sets of characters also can't be ignored. Joel and Henry both take on fatherly roles for Ellie and Sam. Their kids are their entire lives. They would do anything to save them. The second their kids are gone, nothing matters anymore. So when we learn that Joel tried to shoot himself after Sarah's death, it's even more devastating. Henry unfortunately succeeds in doing what Joel failed to do all those years ago. They embody the same kind of loss. Overall, I really like these side characters. You fall in love with them within minutes, which only makes their fates so much more heartbreaking. With the way the show is set up, it could have been easy for these deaths to be impactless, since we meet these characters in the very same episode they die, yet this is not the case. Within the course of a single episode, we meet the characters, learn about them to an extent where we feel we've known them forever, and have to experience the pain of losing them. I'd say the only character I'm not fully on board with is Kathleen. I do think she's written well, her motivations make a lot of sense, and her overall role in the exploration of certain themes is very well thought out. But she wasn't the most compelling on screen, so I had some trouble with her, but in the grand scheme of things, it's a small complaint to have. Speaking of themes, I think the ones explored in The Last of Us are really interesting. When Ellie and Sam are talking after escaping Kansas City, Sam asks Ellie, if you become a monster, are you still you inside? It's a great way to explore the dichotomy between the actual monsters in the show and the characters that remain human yet do monstrous things. Joel is one of the best representations of that. He remains uninfected, yet has done terrible things. He's killed innocent people that he technically didn't need to kill. When Ellie saves his life from a young raider, he ends up killing him even as he's begging for his life and crying for his mother. It's really sad and honestly kind of disturbing, and it's the first time in the show that you start to empathize with the other side. Clickers you have to kill, so there's no dilemma there. Even the Fedra officer who Joel beats to death would have either shot them or turned them in, where they would have been hung, so you can excuse Joel's actions despite how bad they are. But this raider can't be older than 20. He's been completely incapacitated by Ellie's gunshot. He gives up all his weapons to Joel and begs for his life. Yet Joel still kills him to protect himself and Ellie. He was never not going to kill him. You can tell that Joel's past does nag at Ellie. She asks him how he knew the raiders had set a trap for them, and if he's killed innocent people before. She doesn't like this side of him. The thing is, though, that Ellie has a violent heart. David says as much about her, and as much as I hate that man to hell and back, he's kind of right. Ellie attacks a girl while she's still at Fedra. She likes that Joel beats the Fedra employee, and she's been wanting a gun since day one of their trip. But even though there is violence in her, she's not comfortable with it. Every violent action that she's committed has traumatized her to some extent. Violence is difficult for Joel at times too. After he kills the Fedra officer, he spends much of the next episode examining his bloody knuckles, and you can tell he's thinking about the life he just took. but it's not enough to incapacitate him. He's still going to keep going, and that's true of most of these characters. They range from just doing what needs to be done to save themselves to taking pleasure in the hurt they cause. The humans being more monstrous than the actual monsters is a dark and realistic take on this story, and part of what makes it so memorable. The other theme I love about The Last of Us is the thin line between love and pain. There are so many depictions of love in this show between parents and their children, siblings, friends, and almost all of them include or end in some sort of pain and destruction. Henry's love for Sam drives him to send Kansas City's rebel leader to his death. His care for Ellie makes him shoot Sam, and once again, his overwhelming love for Sam drives him to take his own life. Kathleen's love for her brother motivates her to go on a vengeful rampage after overthrowing the QZ. Even though she knows her brother would implore her to forgive, she doesn't care. She just wants revenge for him. And of course, Joel is like the poster child for this concept. Joel beats a man to save Ellie. He kills a man to protect her, whose culty family then seek to kill him because of their love for their fallen man. When Joel loses Ellie, he essentially tortures two men to find her location. That penicillin brought him back with a vengeance, my guy. He was running on bare minimum medicine and a pure, unbridled fatherly rage.
You motherfucker, fuck you. I ain't telling you shit.
It's okay.
No.
I believe him.
No.
At its core, The Last of Us is about what love can make us do. It can be our saving grace, but it can also cause so much pain. Love is the death of rationality, and nothing encapsulates this better than the season finale. In the finale, Joel and Ellie are ambushed and brought to the hospital occupied by the Fireflies. When Joel wakes up, Marlene tells him Ellie is being prepped for surgery. The Firefly doctors think the cordyceps has been growing with Ellie since her birth, making other cordyceps think she's one of them, hence her immunity. By harvesting her cells and multiplying them, they think they can create a cure. But cordyceps grows in the brain, meaning to create a cure, Ellie will die. Of course, Joel is immediately against this. He fights his way through the building, taking out any and every Firefly he comes across, and manages to get to her in time. It looks like they're about to get away when Marlene finds them in the parking garage. She tries to appeal to Joel, telling him that Ellie may be safe as long as Joel is around, but after he's gone, she'll die. But if they can create a cure, future generations may be safe. Joel has the chance now to potentially save millions. He has the chance to put an end to this terrible infection that has taken so much from him and millions of others. He has the chance to act for the greater good. And he does not give a single shit. He kills Marlene even if she asks him to spare her and escapes with Ellie. I loved this. I cannot tell you the pure awe and excitement I had watching the final few minutes of this episode play out. Watching Joel commit all of these terrible actions, then lie to Ellie about the doctors failing to create a cure and the hospital getting attacked by raiders is horrifying and wrong, and it makes so much sense. Ellie is all Joel has. She's his surrogate daughter, his life, his baby. I said before that Joel cannot lose another daughter. He just can't, and now he's faced with that very prospect. To him, this isn't even a dilemma. Why would he care about the rest of the world when his world is in danger? Why would it matter if they were going to end this infection when he would have no reason to keep going afterwards? Of course he chooses to save Ellie. It's what any father would do for their kid. The scene where he massacres everyone in the hospital is chilling. The way the sound slowly starts to be drowned out by the score is evocative of Joel's mental state. He's on war mode. He's not thinking anymore. He's acting on pure instinct and fatherly rage. He's once again on autopilot, but instead of not caring about anything, he cares so much about one thing. The big debate about the end of the series surrounds whether or not Joel was in the right. Ellie has made it clear throughout the series that she wants to help. If there's a chance that her biology could be the key to creating a cure and saving the world, then she wants to offer herself for the cause. We're reminded of that once again in the very last episode, when Joel tells her they can give up on this quest and live their lives together, and Ellie says she wants them to see this through to the end. So Joel's final actions can be construed as taking her choice in the matter away. He went against what she would have wanted for his own, technically selfish reasons. But the thing is that Marlene and the Fireflies don't tell Ellie that the surgery will probably kill her. They just put her under without her permission to do so, without telling her what the surgery would actually entail. They also take away her choice in the matter, so Joel did nothing wrong, go argue with the wall. In all seriousness, I really liked this moral dilemma, and Ellie's not an idiot. She can tell that something about Joel's story doesn't add up, so when she gives him one more chance to tell her the truth and he lies again, it's brutal. She loves him, but can tell he's still holding back, yet she forces herself to buy his story despite it. And it's because of that their relationship will be different. The trust that they share will be different from now on. It's a bittersweet ending, and you just know that this is going to come back in an explosive way. I especially love this because there's a scene in episode 6 when Joel and Ellie come across a dam, and they have this exchange.
So that made electricity?
Yeah. Don't ask me, I don't have a clue.
You know, you could have just made something up. I would have believed you.
I mentioned earlier that Ellie learns about the world from Joel, and it's a bit of a joke throughout the series how honest he is about how much he doesn't know.
Can it hurt me?
No.
Aren't you honest, man? Nice. How does that work?
It's a siphon. It's when liquid travels against gravity because pressure.
You don't know.
I know it works.
It's only after Ellie says that he could literally make stuff up and she wouldn't be able to tell the difference when Joel tells his first white lie.
Yeah, we were cool. Everybody loved contractors.
Nice.
It's an ultimately harmless one and is really endearing, but it sets up the biggest actual harmful lie he tells her at the end of the series, and Ellie doesn't buy it. This whole thing is a great way to foreshadow the end of the season and makes it so much more of a gut punch when she accepts his version of events despite knowing he's lying. Because as much as Joel can't lose another daughter, Ellie can't lose another person important to her, and she would rather keep him in her life than learn the truth. I don't think the finale is perfect. It's one of the shorter episodes of the season, so I think that the pacing was just a little bit too fast at times. Though the finale's impact does hit hard, I think had they slowed it down, it would have been even better. But overall, it's a good ending, and it makes you want to see what happens next. In the end, The Last of Us has taken over my mind for the past couple months, and will probably continue living there rent-free for more time to come. Whenever a piece of media affects me like this, I have no choice but to make a video. It's a way for me to get out some of the immense feelings I have for it and find more people to discuss it with, because most of the people in my life haven't seen it yet. So this video is all I have. Clearly, I have greatly enjoyed this show. There is so much beauty and love in this series, but also so much tragedy and pain. All of it rolls together to create the human experience, which is ultimately what The Last of Us is, an incredibly human story.